Well, welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. This is the Resume and CV workshop for PhD students, though I understand that there's some folks in the room who might be postdocs or masters, and we welcome you as well too. We hope that you can benefit from this, and we wanted to do something specifically geared for PhD students, but of course everyone's welcome. We're glad that you're here. So my name is Kirk Robinson. I work in the grad school. I am the manager of student development, and I do work around, I would say, student development programming specifically for grad students. And some of the work I do is also around academic development, but you might have heard some of the programs that I help out with, such as the Open Graduate Education Program, the Graduate Community Fellows, and the BEST program, which, you know, and higher ed loves its acronyms, right? So BEST stands for Brown Executive Scholars Training. So, so yeah, that's me. Amy, I wonder if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Amy Tarbox. I'm one of the career counselors in Career Lab at Brown. And so we do lots of programming around resumes, cover letters. I do a lot of things around Clifton Strengths training as well for students, undergraduate primarily, but we are filling the role of a graduate advisor shortly. So you will have a new person. Formerly Bev Eric was in that role, but she's since retired. So we're hoping to have someone new for you soon. But in the meantime, all of us can help you out with individual appointments and anything we can do to help you with your career search. So thanks for having me today, Kirk. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for agreeing to partner on this. So we're really grateful for it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Before we really do a deep dive, it's always good to have some workshop learning goals. So really, by the end of this workshop, it's our hope that we can kind of cover a wide gamut, sort of, so that way we can try to address the audience at whatever sort of level we're coming here, or whatever sort of level folks are bringing. So the idea is to sort of know the difference between a resume and a CV, which kind of starts us off at the most basic, but then building to understanding sort of the scenarios in which you would like use a resume, and then understanding ultimately how to build a resume from the CV, because, you know, if our audience are PhD students, and we imagine folks probably feel pretty good about like the CV, but maybe some of the nuances of the resume aren't as prominently featured in your professional lives. And so we're hoping to change that. So let's talk a little bit about the CV. This will probably be review for many of you, but it's good to do the contrast, right, between the two documents. So you know, the CV, it's just that comprehensive list of academic and professional accomplishments, and it can just go as long as it needs to go. You know, I can sort of tell you from my graduate school experience, some like the senior faculty would have a 30-page CV going back to like the 1980s. Like I definitely had that experience, and mine's like, you know, 2 pages as like a first-year doc student. So those memories aren't so far. I'm not too far removed from them yet. So so the length is pretty. It can get quite long. So it is used fairly exclusively for the academic job market in the United States, and I like that caveat, in the United States, because I think other places call the CV and call the CV what it's meant actually as a resume, even though it's called a CV. So, but in the U.S., when we talk about the CV, we are talking about this long academic document that does have discipline-specific jargon, because your audience are people who are probably in the same or similar discipline. And, you know, and that of course would entail faculty members and researchers and folks in your department or your center. So, but that's old news probably to many of you. But so let's then contrast it with this resume here. So it's a lot more tailored and concise, and it's a lot shorter. Usually 1 to 2 pages is what you're aiming for in a resume. And when you're tailoring it, it needs to sort of be selected and categorize skills and experiences that are relevant to the job that you'd be applying to. That's the idea. So, and it is generally the format that folks expect for the non-academic market. And it should be for a wider audience, right? So like, you know, fewer, less language around kind of the technical and discipline specific jargon, and you know, more open sort of language that folks from a variety of different backgrounds can understand. And that would make sense too, since your target audiences would be hiring managers, administrators, and sometimes like staff that are sort of from the non-academic background. So that kind of gets into the sort of the differences between the two, and we're going to dive deeper into what those details look like and provide a little bit more texture. So, yeah.
Great. So I kind of want to talk to you a little bit more. Kirk did a great overview of the differences. I think that's really important to note. But, the purpose of the resume is to motivate the employer to interview, not necessarily hire you. So we're going to be kind of providing that concise summary of your experiences and background that's relevant to the job that you're applying to. So it doesn't need to be everything you've ever done. We can really kind of pick and choose what things are going to be most relevant to that type of position you're applying to. And it's going to provide a medium for marketing and highlighting your relevant competencies and accomplishments. So that's kind of the purpose of it. And what we're trying to achieve here is showcasing the most impressive and relevant experiences to the opportunity you are applying to. So we're going to want to be displaying experience or familiarity with the industry, if that works for you. Highlight your relevant soft skills through the descriptions of your past experiences. We're going to want to list your relevant hard skills. And then we're going to want to convey it all in a pretty brief glance. So employers have a really short attention span. You'll work really hard on it and spend many hours on getting your resume in shape, and they'll look at it for about 15 seconds before deciding to go deeper. So that's sort of offensive, but you need to kind of make sure you're really showcasing your stuff as best you can. And so it's really easy to like glance at and understand why I should keep reading and why I want to learn more about this candidate. So there's that. And then I thought it might be beneficial, skills are definitely something that, you might just do something in R, or you may speak 6 languages and that's just who you are and normal for you, but that's something we really want to be highlighting for employers. So I kind of wanted to take this time to kind of do a deeper dive on how you should be showcasing your skills on a resume. So first we'll start off with kind of more the hard skills. So technical and computer skills here. So, they assume you know Microsoft Office, but it's okay to list it. Also, if you know anything in Adobe, SPSS, data, MATLAB, etc. If you were in, the life sciences, specialized lab equipment, techniques, those are things you want to include. Programming languages. With these, you want to make sure that if you're kind of applying for a technical role, the programming languages you list are ones that you'd be really comfortable, like in a whiteboarding interview scenario. So say you're really great at Java and Python, but Ruby, you're like, I don't know. When you list your programming languages, you should list the ones you're really strong with first, and then you could say exposure to or familiar with, and then list the other ones. That way you're not going to get yourself in a technical interview kind of tough situation there. So that's one way to sort of mitigate that risk. So design skills. So even if that's not necessarily something you did as part of your PhD program or anything like that, but it's something you're good at and it might be relevant to this opportunity, definitely include it. And we need to be careful not to list soft skills. You don't want to say, hey, I'm a great communicator, I'm really good at teamwork, etc. We want to make sure that stuff is included when we're writing the descriptions about what you've been doing. So instead of saying, hey, I'm a great communicator, you could be like, hey, created a tip sheet around this topic, which was then used by 50 undergrads around this topic or something like that. And so it's just a great way you kind of be like, showing instead of telling is really important when you're talking about those kind of soft skills. All right. And then languages. So, we want to be listing any language you speak. And then this is kind of a great way, it's assumed that you speak English, but these are kind of the way to kind of lay out the proficiency of how well you know languages aside from English, even if English is your second. So we could say bilingual, or we'll like list your native language first, and then, it is assumed that you speak English based on the fact that you're applying for something here. But we want to make sure you're not exaggerating your abilities because you never know who's going to interview you and what language they speak, and they might try to conduct the interview in German and you haven't spoken it since high school. So that wouldn't be a fun thing to get into. So those are just ways to kind of cover yourself and make sure that you're really showcasing those language skills in the best possible way. All right.
Yes, and I should point out here that, there is kind of like this binary between the resume and the CV, right? So there's either that very long document that's this comprehensive thing that's covered your career for years and years and years. And then there's this 1 to 2 page sort of short document that's very targeted and very sort of like, intended for a general audience. But you should know though that you can combine, like these formats can be combined. Like there is such thing, for example, as like a hybrid resume. So it's shorter than the CV, but it is going to be longer than the standard resume. And it really needs to be tailored to blend the content between the two. So, and it can include academic experiences as long as they're relevant to the job you're applying for. It should still be skills focused like a resume, but there could be folks who in your audience might appreciate some of the unique academic experiences that you're bringing to the table. So, and later in the presentation, I'll show you an example of a hybrid. It's actually, it's mine. I'll just jump out. It's the one that I used actually for this job because I came from an academic background looking to do something that was less sort of academically oriented in nature in the same way that, you know, a professorial job might be. So, so just know that there is some flexibility between these two kinds of formats and that a hybrid can be relevant. And a lot of it just sort of depends on the type of job that you're applying for, you know, to determine whether it's appropriate to use that. But we'll show you what that looks like. All right. Now we should show some examples that kind of highlight what it is that we've been discussing. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment, and then I'm going to start sharing it again because I want to show folks this great program that all of you can access for free because you're graduate students at Brown, called imaginephd.com. Some of you might be familiar with it, but basically, if I can describe it and then show it to you, Imagine PhD is this, I would say, very sophisticated sort of repository of information and examples of resumes, cover letters, CVs, mostly resumes and cover letters though. But I almost kind of think it's sort of like a one-stop shop for career development. And it's a tool that can be very helpful for you if you're looking for development in these kinds of areas, which I think you are since you're here with us today, right? So I should point out that Imagine PhD, the intended audience is for humanities and social sciences students. But I do think though that it offers enough to where folks from a whole host of different academic backgrounds can really benefit. So, all right, so enough of me talking. Let me show you what it looks like before I mute myself accidentally. Okay, here we go. All right, we should be here now. Okay, let me sign in. And so you can create an account with your Brown credentials, and you should be just good to go. And you'll have access to everything that I'm showing you. So. All right. So once you sign in, you'll see here at the very top all these different kinds of categories. And I'm just going to go over 2 of these today. But I would encourage you to explore them on your own time. I'm going to start with the assessments. I'm going to go over this very briefly. But one of the things that I really appreciate is an opportunity to take a skills, interest, or values assessment. Imagine PhD has these. And basically, I look at these kinds of assessments as sort of an opportunity to get some guidance and get a better sense of the types of things that that sort of an independent tool can tell you about what your interests and skills and values are. And these are all things that are really important to the career development journey, right? So, and I'll share mine because, you know, why not? But like I've taken these assessments multiple times. It's kind of funny too, because when you take them multiple times, sometimes the results shift a little bit. That was the case when I took the interest assessment. As you can see, I took it last year, almost a year to the day, because today's the 16th. That's so odd. So I'm like literally due to take this like today again. I probably won't though, but maybe, I don't know. So, but you know, these were my top 5 interests. I had top 5 skills and then and work values. And I think that I love these because they're helpful in clarifying sort of the direction that one might want to take in terms of a career pathway. And so I do think these assessments can have that kind of use. I think they're a useful tool. It's almost like having a conversation partner, someone interviewing you and asking you like, what are the things that you find important? What are the things that you can do? And sort of like, and sort of like these assessments can be that partner. So that's kind of how I view them. But that's not really why I think it's important. I encourage you to take a look at them. But I actually brought you here to talk about the resources. And when you click on the resources, you'll notice here that there's a drop down for two. There's job family resources and then general. I want to start with general, and then we'll move over to the job families. So when you click on the general resources, it will take you to what I consider to sort of be like a treasure trove of like resources here. Tips for writing a cover letter, tips for writing the resume, information interviews and how to conduct them, negotiating. And like these tip sheets, they're usually just a few pages long, and they provide just really kind of like essential information for how to do some of these kinds of things, like write a cover letter and construct a resume. And so just know though that you have access to these whenever, like you can. I believe these are all in PDF format too, so you can even download them if you'd like. Cover letter is a different workshop for a different time, but very, very important. And so this tip sheet that you see here can be tremendously helpful for you. So yeah. And then of course, they have all these Inside Higher Ed articles here that talk about career development. Laura Schramm, I should note, is an expert in graduate career development specifically. So just some really, really useful things here that I think you could take advantage of. So that's the general resources. I'm just going to quickly jump over then to job family resources. And I really like these because it really digs down into a level of detail that I think is useful. And let me show you what I mean. So basically the job family resources, they divide the resources into different kinds of fields. And again, I kind of think these are more geared towards humanities and social sciences students, but I would also say, explore them and see if you can find them useful for yourself. So you see here, I'm kind of like scrolling down. These are kind of like different kinds of like almost like career clusters, like general broad areas that can contain many different actual kinds of jobs. Now I'm biased, so I'm going to show you higher education administration because that's kind of what I do. And so I click on that, and what it'll do is it'll show you examples of all these different kinds of basically like really, really finely tailored sort of tools. So, and I love to sort of like at the beginning here, it kind of gives you an introduction as to what like a higher education administration job might look like. People who have PhDs with jobs have titles that include all of these things. You could throw mine up there, manager of student development at Brown University, and it would be I think it would fit within that category. And then here, these 4 boxes kind of give you, kind of lead to even more resources. So like you can read stories and articles to help you understand the different kinds of careers in higher ed. Higher ed administration, there is, I mean, they're not kidding when they say that there's a range of careers. There are many. You just think about all the different kinds of jobs that folks at Brown do. That, I mean, it's a pretty long list covering a variety of different sort of areas. And so, when you really like write out a list, it's like, oh my gosh, like, this is like a little tiny city that has all these kinds of, things going on. So, I am going to show you the apply box though. I don't want to, I mean, I'll let you all, if you have time and interest, explore these other ones, but I'm going to click on the apply box because I just think that some of the things in here specifically are really neat. They will actually show you examples of a tailored resume and a tailored cover letter to jobs specifically in higher education administration. And I just think that those kinds of resources are just invaluable because it gives you an opportunity it kind of illustrates for you, hey, what's a version of this look like, So I just think it can serve as a really useful guide. And I think sometimes folks need that when they're going through this process that can be challenging, stressful, the transition from the academic world to, for a job in a non-academic, in the non-academic world, I guess, for a lack of a better way of saying it, is it can cause a lot of dissonance. And so as much support that you can get can be quite useful. And I think these tools offer that. So that's why I'm showing them to you. So, like with the other things, you can download these as PDFs, so you can save them. And then, of course, and this will be the last thing I show you before we jump back to this presentation here. They even list some jobs here too, using Indeed as well. So it can actually give you examples of actual jobs in higher ed administration that are currently being posted. So it's a very interesting website. As someone who cares about and is interested in graduate student development in the sense of like a career development beyond just sort of the academy. I endorse this website. I think it's pretty great. So, and it's free for you. So please take advantage of it. And you can always follow up if you have any questions about it. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. We're going to get back to our presentation, but I appreciate you taking this detour with me. So, all right, hang on just a moment. All right, and I'm going to hit. Okay, so we're back to examples. And now we're on to resources. Amy, do you want to share potentially the folder that contains all of the resources? And then we can talk through them. Oh, you're muted.
Just give me 1 second to grab that for you. In the meantime, here is how to book appointments with myself or any of the other Career Lab counselors for resume stuff, or really any questions about your kind of non-academic search or academic search. Let me just pull up this folder to share with you here. I'm not aware of a website similar to that for science majors, just to answer a question from the chat. Are you, Kirk?
So my understanding is that Versatile Ph.D. also, I believe Versatile Ph.D. is sort of the STEM kind of analog to that one, to the Imagine Ph.D. Mm-hmm. I want to say that I don't know for certain if Brown students have access to that one for free as well too, but I think it's possible that they do. I don't want to say definitively yes, but I guess the last I remember, I kind of think that they do, that we do.
That's great.
So, yeah. I could,
I didn't have this link ready to go, so if you want to.
Yeah, I could grab. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. So yeah, if you want to move on, wait, I got it. We're good.
Oh yeah.
Yep. It's just my system's a little slow for some reason today. So yeah, I don't know if you want to go on with the presentation, and I'll drop that in.
Yes. Okay, cool. I'm going to share my screen once again, and we'll go through. Okay, can you see that? Is that all right? Lovely. So we sort of curated a list here of different kinds of resources that we think you all could benefit from, that are related to resume construction, among other things. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this one. I really like this one because it kind of goes right down the middle in terms of sort of like comparing the two different versions of the CV and the resume.
There you go. It's in. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, we drew fairly heavily from this document to help with our presentation. And then it, of course, so it goes through sort of the differences between the content and the length and the audiences that are relevant to this kind of work. And then, of course, there's the expanded, or otherwise known as hybrid resume, that talks about that talks sort of like in greater detail about what one of these might look like. And like I said, there's an example of one that I'll share. So very sort of useful, quick reference there. So And I guess I'll just jump in and show you an example of what a hybrid might look like that was successful insofar as like I'm sitting here talking to you all. So, I don't live in Oxford, Ohio any longer, but I don't like, you could just find this information on like, LinkedIn if you wanted to, but I consider this to be a sort of a hybrid resume because I talk a little bit about, so like you can definitely see that it's skills based in the sense that I was discussing the specific things that I did in this previous position. But then because the position that I'm currently in does work with graduate students, I wanted to talk about sort of the actual face-to-face work that I did as a graduate assistant, teaching and co-teaching courses. And so I included more academically oriented kind of language here, talking specifically about the courses in higher ed that I helped teach. And so that's where I kind of think like the academic part comes together. And as you can see in the resume too, I foregrounded the skills and sort of the experiences relevant to the position. And then later in the document, and as you can see, I go down here and talk about, again, more academic related stuff. Like these are presentations that I've done with master's students, and these are resources that I've created. But as I kind of continue to scroll to the bottom, that's when I bring in my academic background. I really wanted to make sure that the audience for this saw, these are some of the different things that I did here that would connect well with the position that I'm applying for. And I also talked about some of the service that I'd done as well too, which is usually more academically kind of oriented, something that you might see on a CV. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think I took these directly from my CV and put them in here because I thought that they would be relevant, and I maybe changed the language like a little bit. So, but that was kind of an example of a hybrid that I found and I thought might be helpful. So, as you can, I'll go through some of these fairly quickly. Like this is from Imagine PhD. This is an example of a higher education resume, higher education administration resume that you might find useful. But you can access that, through Imagine PhD or just by utilizing this folder. And then of course the tip sheet for writing a resume. A lot of the same things that we discussed in our presentation you could find here. So we won't go over it ad nauseum. So Amy, I wondered if you want to talk a little bit about this Harvard tip sheet. This is a great resource.
Yeah, so sadly it's not ours, but they're nice enough to let us use it. So this was a great resource that Harvard put together. It's kind of a combination of tip sheet. There's some samples in there, and so a really great Q&A, as Kirk's kind of showing about kind of when do you use this, when do you use that, what I like about it. And we also have this in our own tip sheet. So I don't know how different theirs are. I didn't compare their action verb list with our action verb list. But these are great when you're leading off your bullets, when you're describing what you've done. And so we have these, and we also have different category titles in our tip sheet as well. So, and that's in that folder also. There's also STEM specific resumes and non-STEM specific resumes, PhD ones in that folder that is kind of a brown resource as well. So we just kind of wanted to throw a bunch of things at you, and whatever format of tip sheet or info works best for you. We thought you might want to do a deep dive on it. So we just included as much as we could. The Harvard one's great, but the samples that the Career Lab has are really solid too. And our tip sheet, while targeted towards undergraduates, has those great banks of action verbs and category titles, which could help you kind of tweak your resume in a way to make it really showcase what you have to offer an employer.
Yeah, I love this sort of this list here of action verbs. So generally, when you're describing your skills on the resume, you always want to start off with an action verb, and so you will not need the assistance necessarily of a thesaurus if you have this in front of you. So you're in good shape. Thank you. Are there other ones here? Do we want to go through some of these others as well briefly? Perhaps.
Yep. So this was kind of the general one I was speaking about. This is, like I said, targeted more towards undergrads, but most of the content is completely relevant to you as well. And this is where that bank is of the action verbs, like I talked about. There are samples underneath it that are attached, unfortunately. Those are undergraduate specific, but there still might be really great ways to look at how you would describe your experience based on a wide variety of things. One thing I always like to urge students to include is, leadership and community engagement, or just leadership and engagement. A lot of the stuff that, is kind of like service on a CV can kind of pop over to that category on a resume. So that might be helpful to keep in mind there. So yeah, those are some really good ones. Let's see.
Ooh, yeah, maybe just we'll jump to this one really quick. And then, yeah, I want to get to that last one there with social media. That looked interesting.
Yes, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying. So these are the samples that I think actually Bev had pulled together when she was still at Brown. But there's some really great ways that how she broke it up. We have community consulting and engagement, research experience, which if you're looking to kind of leave academia, your research experience is super valuable in a lot of different fields. And so it's kind of just how you talk about it. So I think these are some really great examples in here on how to kind of talk about your research in a way that isn't so specific to the topic and just the skill set that you've gotten out of it. So those are really valuable to be checking into.
Yeah, this looks really great. And then we have a non-academic STEM, which will be useful for folks in STEM. And then, yeah, what I was referring to just a few moments ago was the social media for the job search. This looks really interesting.
So that's kind of using, once you have your resume content, and I just love how they did the graphics on this. I think it's adorable. So that's one of the reasons I love it. But also really, using LinkedIn to really showcase your skills and kind of to a slightly different audience potentially. There's lots of great jobs on there. And then also thinking about, if there's an organization or a company you're really excited about, follow them on Twitter. Facebook, a lot of times they'll post jobs there, probably less on Facebook now than previously, but definitely the LinkedIn, Twitter. If an organization's hiring, they tend to kind of push it out through those channels as well. And so there's some really great ways to kind of be thinking about that, and also definitely using LinkedIn to find other people in the field that you're interested in to chat with and do informational interviews. And I know, the Imagine Ph.D. had some really great tip sheets, it looked like, on doing some of that networking and those networking conversations. This can kind of augment that as well. So just some fun little tips with adorable bear graphics that might brighten your gray Friday.
So yes, please know that, so we've shared our contact information for you. And I think the plan is to send folks information, basically send a follow-up email after this presentation that shares much of what we've discussed. I think this presentation could be something that we share, but the folder, the list of what we just got done explaining and showing, that repository of resources will definitely share view access to that for sure. And as well as I'll share the Imagine PhD link and maybe some directions on how to create your, I think it's fairly intuitive, but I'll try to throw some things in there to help make it easy in case any technical support is needed. And of course, please feel free to reach out to either of us though, with questions for sure. So,
and I put some appointments in for resume discussions starting on Monday afternoon, and then I'm doing Monday afternoons and Friday mornings. But you don't just have to meet with me. Any of the career counselors are fantastic at helping out, so don't feel like you have to just do appointments that I'm available at. But I did put those in for Monday and Friday for the next few weeks. So, and if those times don't work, you can always reach out to me directly, and I will find a time to help you out.